This is the Saturday panel about the theme of respect, right? It's been in the headlines a lot in the last few weeks. Respect on the sidelines for participants and officials in sport especially. We've heard reports of the shocking assaults on referees in Gaelic games recently, but it all starts somewhere, often with a culture of a sideline, the genesis of intimidation, behaviour that's a bit over the top, maybe kids getting a bit of stick. So to chat about the whole landscape, how we as human beings can do better as spectators or participants on a sporting field, we're joined in studio here by the GA referee Kevin O'Donnell, accredited performance psychologist Keith Begley and coach Antonio Mantero to chat about this topic over the next hour. So Kevin, Keith, Antonio, you're very welcome to Off the Ball here on a Saturday.
Thank you. Nice to be here, Sean.
Great for coming in. Appreciate your time. And abuse on the sidelines, is it a problem? Is it overblown? Is it real? What have your experiences been? We'll get through the experiences for maybe the first 20 minutes of the panel. Kevin, what is it like for you day to day? I believe you referee GA matches in camogie, ladies football, men's football as well. When it comes to getting stick on a sporting pitch, what's your general feeling of where things are right now for you?
Yeah, so I referee a lot.
Okay.
I have somewhere close to 100 games done this year, so I'm out all the time.
Which county is this in?
This is in Dublin.
Okay.
So I see it across GAA, across hurling, across LGFA and across camogie. And I would say that there is a culture there of attacking is probably the wrong word, but certainly questioning the referee, shouting at the referee, roaring at the referee, roaring at children. I do a lot of kids' games as well, roaring at children as well. I definitely think there's an issue there, right? And I've seen it myself. I've seen it firsthand. I've seen it looking at other matches and seeing people reacting to the referee as well. It's definitely something we have to address. And indeed, the Camogie Association released a letter this week in Dublin about that because they've kind of started to draw a line under this and say this can't happen anymore.
Were you surprised by the incidents in Roscommon and Wexford?
Yeah, I think we all were, right? I mean, let's not forget, this is a game. This is what we're doing for fun. This isn't meant to be enjoyable. It's meant to be enjoyment. People turn up to see athletes play. The athletes turn up to play and enjoy themselves. And we have had situations in Kerry, Wexford, Roscommon where, you know, referees who are volunteers are getting out and getting assaulted. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. It's ridiculous that people leave their house in the morning time and end up in hospital. It's beyond belief, in a way.
Mm. Now, there might be a situation, in each individual situation, it could be the case that they fell or whatever, but we're in a situation where, as you say, they did end up in hospital. From your perspective, do you ever think to yourself, why do I bother?
No, I don't. And I'll tell you, I love refereeing. I really do. I really enjoyed it. If I have one thing that I regret about refereeing is that I didn't start it earlier. That's what I would say. Refereeing is great, and 90% of the time, or even higher than 90% of the time, it's a great activity. It's a great way to be involved in the sport. I have to deal with situations from sidelines and coaches, very, very rarely from players, but from sidelines and coaches.
Parents?
Definitely parents on the sidelines. Definitely coaches who a lot of the time happen to be parents as well. And sometimes that can be pretty stressful, okay? And it's certainly not a situation that anybody
Ever
wants
intimidatory?
I think when you're getting constantly heckled right from the sideline, it can become a little bit intimidatory, right? And there are ways that you kind of deal with that yourself on the pitch. You know, I may not run as close to that sideline as often as I may use different running lines and things like that. But you know it's happening, right? You're hearing it, a lot of the time from sidelines. So does it get to the level of intimidatory? Yeah, at times it can do, yeah.
And has it ever affected your mental health?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm very good at compartmentalising,
right.
And so, I go out to do the best job that I can, and I truly think every ref that I've ever spoken to, and there's a lovely community of referees there, goes out to do the best job that they can. I am able to park it and move on.
Yeah.
And I actually think that, writing it down, if there is abuse there, writing it down in the referee's report is cathartic. I get it down on paper and then I move on and I don't think about it anymore.
So Antonio, you've been coaching soccer underage, I believe, at Castleknock?
Yeah.
And you had this initiative called the Silent Sidelines initiative. So maybe talk to us about that, Silent Sidelines.
Yeah, I suppose the idea is just to recreate how children will play in a playground. So, the idea is that they would be able to play the game without having the constant stream of instruction and added noise coming from the sideline. So if you can imagine two teams playing out in your front green, they're playing there with freedom. They're going from mistake to mistake without even realising it. They're more focused on the recovery or just getting the ball back. So the whole idea of the weekend is to recreate that. So where children are just allowed to play their game without having the fear of making mistakes, without constantly having to look to the sideline for direction or for instruction. So they just play the game with total freedom. And for me, it's the idea is that clubs and leagues and that would introduce it at the start of the season. So it just sets I suppose for the year, it would just set how people should respond and how people should behave on the sideline. So, and it just gives children the freedom to play the game in the way that they want to play the game, and the reason why they entered to play sport in the first place, because most of them would have started from the playground, or most of them would have started from the green, and then they would have been introduced into organised football or organised sport through a friend or maybe through school or whatever, But the reason they got into the first place is because it was fun and they enjoyed playing it on their own with their friends. So the idea is just to try and recreate that scenario for kids as often as possible.
Now, where did that come out of? Was that coming out of your observations of the sideline being out of control?
To be honest, it came out of my own behaviour on the sideline. So
right.
When I started out, I was definitely a prowler. I was definitely running up and down the sideline, constantly shouting instructions, constantly trying to dictate the tempo of the game, constantly trying to pass on.
What age group were you teaching?
I started, I think it was under 13s, 14s.
Right.
So my very first game, that's how I was. So, after that first game, I reflected a little bit and I said, look, there has to be a better way. I have to find a better way to coach these children. I have to find a better way to get the message across. And from there, I just started to blog and I started to write about it, and I just started to research and find ways of how to coach children better. And how to coach the game where they could express themselves with freedom without having me to help them on the sideline. So for me, the very best coaches are the best observers. They'll be on the sideline, they'll be taking notes, and they'll pass on the information when the game is stopped or before the game or at half-time, but they certainly won't continue to instruct throughout the game. I'm not saying that I'm perfect. I still at times, I'm coaching seniors now, and I still at times instruct.
So what age are you coaching now?
Seniors.
Okay.
Seniors. But I try to find moments in the game where I can pass on information. I mean, one thing is for sure, no matter what age you are playing sport, nobody wants to hear their name shouted constantly from the sideline. Nobody wants to constantly be distracted from constant direction or constant instruction coming from the sideline. And that goes across all ages. So for me, as a coach, you should never want to win more than the players themselves. And I think a lot of the abuse and the culture of the win at all costs stems from that, where coaches and parents actually want to win more than the kids themselves.
And having checked yourself, are you now quite frustrated when you see that behaviour?
Yeah, I am, but I'm also, if I see a line that's, I suppose quite negative and constantly, asking for decisions to go their way, or constantly, berating the referee, it actually makes me a little bit more calmer, and actually makes me maybe use reverse psychology, where I'll actually say to the referee, when he does get a decision right, I'll applaud him and say, well done, ref, and try and be a bit more positive about things. One thing is for sure, I'd never blame a referee for the defeat. I think that ultimately you have to look at yourself as a coach. You have to look at yourself, why things happen. I think, being a referee is a very, very difficult job. I would never want to do it myself, and I have total respect for referees and officials. I mean, it's a really, really hard, difficult game, and I think a lot of people don't realise that. And if they were to step across the line and pick up the whistle and the cards, they'd find, really how difficult it is to manage a game at all levels. And certainly now it's a lot more difficult. I mean, when I played football, there was coach on one side and coach on the other side, and those coaches were basically having a to and fro to each other, and that was it. But now, from the very young ages where children are introduced to sport, from whatever, 6, 5, 4, 3 in some cases, there could be 3 or 4 parents or relatives coming along. So you could have anything from 25 to 30 parents on one side and 25 to 30 parents on the other side, who all have an opinion about the game. So it's very difficult for referees to control the game, and I think everybody just needs to stand back away from the sideline, relax, and just enjoy the experience and stop getting so emotionally involved in the game.
So Keith, like from a human point of view, as an accredited performance psychologist, like being shouted at or being, spoken to throughout a game, there's a competitive environment, obviously, but there's also the balance from a mental health perspective for a young person and how they form their, view of the world. As one of our texters was remembering something happened 20, 30 years ago about how he was spoken to by a coach.
Yeah, I suppose really, like, if I'm a young lad there and I'm getting ballyragged by either a coach or a parent or whatever, my whole kind of sense of kind of self and kind of self-identity and self-worth is being challenged in front of my peers. So you're going to be resentful of that, and like if I'm playing sport, I'm there to enjoy the experience. I'm 12, 13, 14, 15, irrespective of what any age. I mean, if you're an adult, you don't want to be, I suppose, undermined, for want of a better word, in front of your peers. You want to enjoy the experience, and you're doing your best. Like, it can be communicated about what maybe you want your team to do in a constructive fashion. So there's, I suppose, the relational dynamic that's fostered around a group. A coach has a huge impact on that, and very often you'll see where the referee is experiencing, it would say, beyond that kind of, I suppose, backlash from the players. It's often very reflective of a coach, and the dynamic that's created around the whole group dynamic. And invariably where you find that the coach is kind of respectful and has a degree of control over his players, that invariably there isn't that same volume of issues for a referee. I don't know that the referees, Kevin, would you come across that? The influence of the coach in terms of the dynamic around the game, is that significant?
I absolutely would, and what I find, and what other referees, I was talking to a referee just at the start of this week, when coaches and parents start roaring and shouting at children and roaring and shouting at the referee, what happens is you undermine the referee, and it's almost this mentality that, the guy or gal who's in the middle of the pitch, who studies the rules, and he or she doesn't know anything, and the coach or the parent knows everything, right? And how that affects the children on the pitch is they start to disbelieve the referee, right? And what happens is they start to go in harder, they start to go in rougher, they start to, dissent. And what happens is they actually end up getting cards themselves because it seeps, it infects the pitch. It's a really interesting phenomenon when you see it happen. And I've had a couple of games this year where coaches are roaring and shouting, ref this, ref that, ref the other. These are all perfectly legitimate decisions that are being made, but because they don't agree with them, and that infects their team, and then all of a sudden you have players who start to question the referee. Either a 12 or 13-year-old girl in one of the matches this year who told me I needed to take a referee's course. Right? And I yellow carded her. I was there. Do you know what you're doing here? Like, I mean, really, this is not where we should be, But that was because, and I had a chat with the coaches after that game. I said, you need to stop this now. So it is real. It does happen, and it does seep in for sure.
Would you be of the view, maybe from their studies of psychology, that parents sometimes maybe live their own expectations through their children?
Yeah, I think there's a huge element to that. I'd see it where very often, it's a case of that exact point where they're trying to win. It's a little bit ironic in a way, because you have to look at, like, why are they putting their kids into sport in the first place? So you're trying to, like, typically, if you're looking at, they're trying to develop discipline, resilience, and all these different life qualities, if you like.
Belonging, camaraderie as well.
Exactly. But on the other side of it, then they're very often acting in a way as a result of emotional investment. Like, they want them to win. Now, if you're trying to develop resilience, say, for example, and people, it's like in sport, it's as a result of losing and dealing with adversity. Resilience is a skill developed in adversity. But if you're, constantly going as a coach or whatever, or as a parent, trying to win every game by, X amount of goals plus one, you're actually taking away that opportunity for development of resilience, and by the same token, you're supposed to be a role model as a parent, and you're trying to imbue discipline and all these different qualities in these kids, but the very nature of your acting on the sideline, either as a coach or as a parent, is undermining everything you're supposed to be standing for in the first place. And it's probably as a result of, everybody wants to win, but there's a good way to win, there's a right way to win, and there's a wrong way to win. And it's how we carry ourselves as role models, as coaches, as parents. We have had our time in sport, and like you said, some coaches, not all, some parents, not all, are so emotionally invested that when, you know, it's maybe a close game, the red mist comes down and everything has to be challenged. You know, whether it's the referee's decision, and sometimes even it's their own coaches of their own parents' decision. So, for example, it might be coaches have to experience maybe a backlash of parents because their kid might have been substituted in an under 13 match to give another kid a run. You know, so like we have to look at this bigger picture stuff on how this has come about in recent times. And like this isn't just in recent times, this is going on for years. I remember when I was 10 years of age, I was at a football match across the road, and I remember a referee giving a player a yellow card and received a backlash from the player. He gave him a red card, and it was followed by a punch from the player, and he was laid out and an ambulance was called. So like it was rural football, so it wouldn't have made headlines, but this is
now
going on
it would
for
have
years.
been on camera phone.
Exactly. Well, the social media dynamic and everything has changed the dynamic. I suppose smaller localized incidents are coming more into national media, if you like, that may not have done in the past, but it was always there. But I think there's lots of strides have been made. I think, particularly in terms of underage coaching. I think, as I see it, in terms of, we'll say, for example, in GAA, the Go Games, the process and development in terms of introduction, I think is hugely transformative. If you look at it in terms of, you know, your 7, 8, 9, 10, 11-year-olds, it's sport for all. It's inclusive. Very often the coaches will actually referee the games, and as a result, you know, coaches and parents are heavily involved. They have a better picture by the time they get to 12, 13, 14 than they maybe used to be. I think there's better coach education. There's better models of coach education and support structures in place. But I suppose social media sometimes catastrophizes small incidents that do happen. It is there. It's certainly there, and the bad incidents are bad. But I think generally, I'd like to think that there's a lot of good stuff going on to counteract it.
Antonio, what's your take on that, what Keith has said there, and the whole obsession with winning?
Yeah, I think maybe for GA, and I was just thinking about this, that maybe even at, you know, at the amateur level with GA, that a lot of games are played in stadium. They have that stadia feel about it, and I think sometimes when you enter into a stadia, you know, people, when they feel that they're there to win, so they have it. It's almost like it's the entertainment zone as opposed to the development zone. So when I see the entertainment zone, I say when we're watching games on TV, the Premier League or even in Croke Park, you know, that's that stadium feel. So that's once you enter into that stadium feel, you kind of have that, you know, your team is there to win. And I think, I mean, I could be wrong, but a lot of the GA games, you know, at senior level and maybe underage as well, a lot of them are played in little enclosed stadia, and it allows for spectators then to be in the stands and to say whatever they want and to get emotionally involved in the game. As for, I suppose, with a lot of soccer games, a lot of it's just played in parks. It's very few of it's played in stadia, so there maybe isn't that element of total emotion, because, well, particularly at senior level, you're not actually allowed on the pitch. You've got to stay outside the barrier. You've got to. Do
you feel the emotion is in check in soccer on the sideline?
Is it in check? No, I think soccer also has a lot of problems, particularly at the underages. Yeah, there's a huge element of certainly of win at all costs, of overzealous parents, and I think maybe, like what you said, you get a lot of parents that have never actually played sport before, so they don't know how to conduct themselves because they've never been involved in a team structure. They've never been involved in being on the sideline other than now with their child, and they just, yeah, like they see that red mist, and again they see their child and they just solely just focus on their child and not focus on the big picture, which is the game and the development of that child and the development of the team, which is so many factors around the team. I know a lot of games now, particularly in soccer, are recorded. Like, for instance, we record our games. We actually stream them live. So when you're live streaming, you're certainly really conducting yourself on the sideline because you know you're being live streamed here. So that in itself helps with controlling behaviour. It helps with controlling the emotion of the game, certainly from our substitutes and even parents who are there, because it's being recorded and you can hear absolutely everything, you know, so that helps. I don't know if I've seen a lot of games GA where they're live streamed, you know, but...
OK, we got to take a break. Thank you, Antonio Mantero, Kevin O'Donnell, Keith Begley on abuse from the sidelines, respect, how we can foster greater respect interested in the listeners' observations, comments, questions you might have. You'll get a lot of this in here on 53106. It costs 30 cents. Have things improved? Are reports of intimidation overblown? Is there enough respect on the sideline? Can parents check themselves a bit more? Off the ball Saturday on News Talk, and the Saturday panel is back after 2. Stay Saturday on News Talk. John Duggan with you 3 to 5. We're on the panel at the moment. 53106 our text number. You can tweet us at Off the Ball. We're chatting to GA referee Kevin O'Donnell, accredited performance psychologist Keith Begley, and the soccer coach Antonio Mantero about respect on the sideline, fostering a positive environment. The subject of referee intimidation obviously is always a hot topic. Huge reaction from our listeners out there. 53106. I'm just going to read out some of these texts. My son is a 15-year-old GA ref. He gets heckled from coaches and sidelines every match. On one occasion, I was told he would need a police escort off the pitch at an under-10 match. Today, even after the letters published this week, a coach argued with him at half-time over a decision. This is an adult arguing with a 15-year-old child. He constantly feels intimidated. He is considering giving up, says Bob in Dublin. OTB simple solution to the ref issue. All refs should wear body cams. Data instantly sent to the cloud. No parent will attack them. No player will abuse them. Data in the cloud means there's no point in grabbing the camera. Everyone knows the cameras work this way. Problem will end instantly, says Martin in Dublin. Hello, as a dad of a 16, 14, 12-year-old, I've attended rugby, soccer and GA coaching courses. They've all emphasised the enjoyment of kids and winning is not important. But over 10 years observing all these sports and being involved sometimes, it's clear this is all just words. 90% of underage coaches and parents are just worried about the win. It's a joke. Just look what happened at the under-14 academy fixture between Cork and Finn Harps this weekend. Cork forfeited because Finn Harps wanted to maintain home advantage. 40 kids do not get to play a game because adults cannot agree. It's so disappointing, says George O'Brien. Great show tackling this cancer in football. Abuse and dissent from the sidelines has affected my mental health on occasions, mainly in the early years of my 18-year soccer refereeing experience, says John. Surprised to hear your contributor saying he was shocked at the assaults on those refs. I'm not a GA fan, I've no skin in the game, but I wasn't surprised at all to hear of the assaults. It seems to be a repeated story every few weeks somewhere in the country. I don't think the constant machismo image of the game, which GA promotes through TV and radio adverts, helps. It needs a reboot from the top down, which will take time, says Dave and Offaly. Well, I don't know if the GA would agree with that. On referees, why on earth is an assault on a referee any different to that person being assaulted at Tesco or walking down the street? There's absolutely no difference. The law must be upheld. If these idiots think they'll be arrested and charged, they won't do it. Witnesses every time cut and dried. 53106. I think the sporting organisations had the competitive tone from a young age, which derives that competitive nature from the sidelines. Girls underage soccer, 8 to 10-year-olds being streamed by ability. Our club approached the league organisers. We were trying to play in mixed ability teams and were suffering poor results. Response from the organisers was that we should stream our teams based on ability. How are all kids supposed to learn and enjoy when this is a mentality at 8 years of age? Anybody want to pick up on any of those messages?
Well, I suppose with the ability one, I mean, you know, sport is, for me, it streams way too early, you know, which has a huge effect on children as well, because they're not able to play with their friends, they're separated from their friends, you know, so, you know, lots of children have periods of progression and improvement over their long pathway to football or Gaelic games or whatever it is, you know. My advice to that person would be just to maybe don't enter into a league and just try and play teams every weekend or organise blitzes within your club, and you know you'll certainly, the children will obviously get more contact time on the ball. There'll be less travelling time, which will mean more contact time on the ball as well, and you're able to allow children to play as often as possible as well, and there's no element there of the win at all costs or competition, or you know, so it's much more about freedom of play and development.
Yeah, I suppose there's pluses and minuses to everything, you know. Streaming will always be there once you get to, we'll say, 13, 14, 15. Once there's, like, the nature of the structure of a competition streams it. Because, you know, if you're in a competition, a coach will pick their best team. And if it's football, it's your best 11. If it's Gaelic football or hurling, it's your best 15, and so on and so forth. But it's what we do as coaches, you know, around the back end of our squads, in terms of making kids feel valued, included, feeling wanted, feeling part of something. Okay, so it's how we interact as coaches is I think is key here. So how do players feel treated when they're walking away at the end of the session? That they're not the person that's, you know, after travelling maybe half an hour for a match and sitting on the sideline, they might get 1 minute or no minutes at the end of a game. So, you know, are they going to keep coming back? So, you know, if I'm a coach, you know, can I organise with the opposition coach that maybe, you know, we have weaker players. What can we do for these weaker players? And this isn't just underage sport. Like, I mean, I heard Ronan O'Gara speak about this very point only, was it last week, about how he manages his 24 to 34, you know, in terms of keeping the group positive, because they want to play just as much as your top players. You know, they want to feel valued the same way as the top players. And if they don't feel valued, you know, why would you come back if your whole kind of sense of self, your identity and all that is being challenged because the manner in which the coach dictates how good you are? You know, so like there's a whole kind of philosophy here around coaching that needs to be addressed. And like I it's quite interesting. I do stuff around I suppose coach education for GAA in terms of Ward 2 and stuff like that. And part of the section I do is around creating an environment for success. And it's amazing to go and we throw out questions about experiences that the coaches would have had, you know, when they were playing maybe 15, 20, 30 years previous, and some of the horror stories that they would have experienced as kids in terms of how they were treated by coaches. And invariably, or very often, that's, you know, a significant catalyst in why they leave sport and why they leave sport early. You know, so like there was research done. Sport Netherlands would have done a lot of research around this, and they narrowed it down to 14 different factors on why kids quit sport, 5 of which were connected to adults. And one of really important one was their perceived competence about how good they are or how good they aren't. Okay, so the influence of the coach in how a player feels about how good they are or how good they aren't is hugely significant, because they feel if they're not being treated in a way that they feel valued, they're not going to come back and they just disengage. I suppose John Morrison, he's a famous Irish coach who passed away. People in GA circles would know him
often
from
Mayo, yes,
Mayo and with Mickey Moore and so on. But he had a line. I met him one time and he had a line. It was some seminar somewhere, and he said, players mightn't always remember what a coach says, but they'll always remember the way you make them feel. You know, and it's true across sport, across business, across any organisation. How, as a leader within your organisation, do you make people feel?
Not what you say.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Rather than what you say.
Exactly.
I think
exactly.
for coaches is a great one is if you fast forward 10 years and look back on your coaching experience and then ask yourself, how do you want to be remembered? How do you want people to see you as a coach for the things that you did?
Yeah.
And I think the occasional peek forward will really help, you know, coaches get in check and realise why they're in it in the first place. And, you know, ultimately you're in it because you want to, because it's fun, and you want to carry that enjoyment through your whole coaching pathway. Yeah. And you also want to improve players. You want to bring them on and keep them coming back.
Yeah.
Just on that, like there's a great coach down in Tipperary, Paddy Butler, who was director of hurling nationally, I suppose, for maybe 7 or 8 years before Martin Fogarty. And his sole criteria for success was how many 13-year-olds, he was a primary school principal, how many 13-year-olds can he get to 18, 19, 20, still playing, at which point they'll make their own decisions as to whether they want to continue or not. Because what you don't want is kids leaving the sport because the manner in which they feel treated or not treated right by the coaches, by the adults that are involved in the system. You know, that if they choose to leave or go to a different sport or not play, it's because they want to do something else. It's not because they feel that they're being treated badly. And that's kind of where we need to get.
This kind of gets back to the mentality, the winning mentality, right? Which is, you know, sport is a game. It's meant to be fun. It's meant to be fun for children. And Tony's been very strong on this, right? And you have adults in control of the situation who will keep children, let's remember, most of the time when we're talking about this, it's children on the sideline for 55 minutes, even just sit there the whole game, not talk to them because they want to win the game. That child or those children are entitled to play. It's their team, it's their game. And I think we need to move past this kind of winning mentality where you're, you know, as a coach and as an adult, you're trying to win more than the kids are. I get it at adult level, right? And there is a difference there, but certainly at the children level, everybody should be playing, and that's the principle of the Go games, where you get all the way up to 12, and I've got kids playing in Go games. But once you go beyond that, it does start. I've seen it. It does start to get a winning mentality. And to Keith's point, you know, I have kids playing, and they do remember how you make them feel. I mean, clearly, they don't actually remember about the medals. They want to be part of a team. They want to be part of something enjoyable. Leaving them on the sideline is just a silly.
Surely, as well, for adults, the best way for them to become the best sports people they can be is to have the best skills, and it should be about coaching skills first and not coaching winning first. Correct.
And if I may go back just to the streaming for a second, because I have a slightly contrarian view on the streaming. So if you are, and I've got kids playing in all sorts of different divisions, and we all play GAA, etc. If you're one of these kids who's not quite there yet, and it's not to say that you won't get there, right? To my mind, if you're getting played in corner forward or in some kind of position where you're not getting a lot of ball, you're not able to develop in a match situation as well as if you were playing a slightly lower level, but you were playing in midfield or centre forward or centre back or whatever, where you were getting more time on the ball, you were getting to make those decisions and, kicking points and missing and doing all of those sorts of match situations that you just don't get if you're playing at kind of too high a level. And it's not to say that, at 12, it's dictated, he's a Premier League player, she's a Division 1 and she'll, whatever. I mean, there has to be osmosis between the teams, and again, that goes back to the coaches, right? You need the coaches to be, willing to coach players and the skills, as you're saying, John, but also open to bringing players up and send them down to say, look, you need a bit more time with the ball. We're going to play in midfield on the second team to see how you get on there.
Yeah, I think
go on.
A huge factor is that at most clubs you'll have your A team and your B team and your C team, and generally the A team is where a lot of the emphasis and time is put into. They might get the best training facilities, they might get the most experienced coach, they might get the most qualified coach, whatever it is. And as it comes down, it tends to be the last team will get the parent that's just been thrown in at the last minute, has absolutely no experience with coaching kids, has no experience with coaching the game, with no experience with coaching skills. So for the vast majority of those children in the C and the D, they'll always be in the C and the D. They've absolutely almost zero chance of ever making it up because they're always being coached the same way with the same players. But if you put, say slightly weaker kids with better kids, eventually some of the weaker kids will push on. They will push on and they will improve. But when you put all the worst with the worst, you're generally going to, the worst with the worst are generally going to all stay together. Across the games, I see it in football where, even at 13s, you might have some of the C and D teams, they're not ready for the 11-a-side pitch, so maybe we should be looking at keeping them on the 9-a-side pitch or keeping them on the 7-a-side pitch. So they're experiencing, more opportunities in the game, they're experiencing more contact with the ball, they're scoring more goals, they're enjoying it a lot more. There's a lot of kids who are being pushed onto big pitches and they're just not able for it. The pitch is too big, the ball is too heavy, whatever it is. And I think we need to look at that. If you look at certain countries like Belgium, they don't play under 15, or they don't play 11-a-side, I think, until 15s. In Ireland, we're playing 11-a-side at 13s. And actually only a number of years ago, we were playing 11-a-side at under 11s and under 12s. So, I mean, it is improving. But certainly that is a way of certainly developing kids, allowing them to play the game, smaller game, in smaller spaces where they're getting more contacts in the ball and more opportunities in the game to make decisions. And they're more involved in the game, of course.
53106, plenty of messages in from the audience on this one. In my own experience, I've seen an emphasis on the best players while really ignoring players that are not as good and are just given up on early. Some coaches are the dads of the best players. The chances of any one of the better players making it as professionals, which I believe these dads think their kids will do, is so small. It is an utterly misdirected view of kids' football or any other sport. My son plays under-9 soccer, is a very average player. They streamed earlier this year. It has seen a massive help to him. Gets a lot more touches. He's on the third team and his confidence has grown and skill has improved, says one of our texters. Soccer and GA dad, our 13-year-old son, the shouting at players and refs on the GA sideline is terrible, abusive, especially to the ref. Totally different to the soccer. All positive feedback to the kids, very little interaction towards the ref except for the odd come-on ref, but still room for improvement. Only the coach or captain should speak with the ref, says Jim and Hoth. JD, why are you ignoring rugby in this conversation? Well, I think rugby is probably the best of the sports in terms of fostering respect. So if anybody's got a contrarian or a different view on that.
Well, I had heard that there was 27, well, 27 is a small number of reported cases of abuse last year, and that was over 3,500 games in rugby.
And obviously with the referee, they've only the captain can speak to the referee.
Yeah, and actually, one of the things I put on my Twitter feed during the week was, there should be a ref liaison, because a lot of the times what we're hearing again and again is coaches, and to some degree parents. And
what do you think is a split?
Well, you see, as you go up the grades, the parents fall away. Right, there's not that many parents sitting on the at a junior 7 game. You know what I mean? So as you go up the age groups, even under 16, there aren't as many players as there are under 13. Right, so it depends on the age that you're refereeing. Right, but what I find is that coaches are unfamiliar with the rules. Let's just call it that. And I've had numerous instances of this, and every referee you talk to. So I was at a game there recently where the referee, a former national referee, was doing a camogie game, and he had a pretty good game. I mean, I was watching him. I happened to be there watching the game, not because I was watching him, but and there was just a torrent of abuse at this man throughout the game, and the words that were used, and this was at a children's game. It was under 15 or under 16 or something like that, and I could see the kids at the sideline, right, looking down at these parents, kind of going, my goodness, so I actually don't know whether we can educate parents to the level, because some of these rules are quite complex, right? And it's the referee's job to know them. What I almost find is this Dunning-Kruger effect, right? I played the game 30 years ago, and by goodness, I know the rules. And a lot of the time they don't, and they're just. It's like parents get a temporary Tourette's syndrome as they come onto the grass. It's funny, but it's not funny, and the kids can hear them. The kids can hear them. I remember I was watching it wasn't even my team. I was watching them looking up at this group of parents shouting.
The same thing, repetition. Yeah.
It was calling in. It was every decision that the referee made. He was a stupid blah blah blah. Everything. I mean, he couldn't do anything right. And I was watching it, and I'm a fairly decent referee myself. He was getting, I'd say, 9 out of 10 right. We don't get everything right. We don't. Nobody does. If
it's just like a machine gun then from the sideline.
It's absolutely.
Is there an element of the referee actually taking control of that from an early stage of the game, and maybe approaching the sideline? I know we spoke about it outside.
Yeah. Something we spoke about actually outside. Something that I'm doing, because what I've seen this year is an awful lot more trying to ref the game from the sideline, right? And what I've now started to say to coaches is, I'm here to ref the game. I actually study the rules. I read them this morning. I know what I'm doing. I might not see everything, and there's all sorts of reasons why you won't see everything, right? It's a very dynamic game, soccer, GAA, and it could be something as simple as somebody just runs across your eyesight or your eye line exactly as that situation happens. And as referees, we're trying to be dynamic. We're trying to get ourselves into a position but these things happen, right? And so you don't see everything, right? But of course, somebody from the sideline sees it a slightly different way, and oh my goodness, ref, and this, that and the other, and I'm using nice words here. It's not that the ref didn't want to see it or is ignoring it. They didn't see it for lots of different reasons. And I think if, we need to address that at a club level, at a local level, to say, guys, we need to give referees a break. This is really hard, right? We're making 300 or 400 decisions per game. Is that 4 steps, 5 steps, 6 steps? Did he hop the ball? Was that a proper tackle? Was he chopping on the arm? All of these things we're trying to compute all at the same time, right? It's actually really, really hard. And we're not going to get everything right.
Yeah.
But we get a lot right.
And same for the player. The player's making that amount of decisions in the game as well. So, parents and spectators need to realise that when the ball, before it arrives or is about to arrive, the player is making a lot of conscious decisions as well, and then needs to decide one.
Yeah.
And then might have 4 or 5 decisions or, voices coming from the line on what you should do and shouldn't do,
Yeah.
I mean, I think for referees, GAA referees, you've got a lot of ground to cover. You probably almost need a GoPro on your front and back, so you can watch the whole pitch, but you have a serious amount of ground to cover. I mean, it's a little bit different to we'll call it soccer here, even though I like calling it football, but we'll call it soccer. They have linesmen for the most part, and they have someone in the middle, the referee. There's the offside, so there's an element that the pitch is quite narrow. They're generally confined within a certain amount of space. As for with a GA pitch, they're corner to corner, you know. So, I mean, I think parents and coaches need to realise how difficult it is to referee a game, and you know, maybe you should just take up a game. You know, bring the cards, go take up a game, and experience it for yourself, and experience how difficult it is to ref a game, and at the same time get all the abuse from the sideline. You know,
and try and get all the decisions right. And you really, really are trying to get all the.
And you mentioned a great thing, which was, you also have to mark your book every time there was a score. You were saying you had to mark for a point, and mark, and that in itself could throw you off.
You're like your own admin department out in the middle of the pitch. You know, I've a book of, you know, all the games this year, and if you get that score in the wrong box, you put a point in the goal box, or you put that goal against the wrong team, it really, you know, it can flip a game over on its head. You have to be really focused all the way through.
Yeah, go on, Keith.
I think there's certain sports need to take a leaf out of, we'll say, the respect that's engendered in rugby.
I'll just interrupt you there. And now Celtic have gone 2-1 up against St Johnstone in the 95th minute. St Johnstone equalised. They make it 1-1 on stoppage time, and Celtic have just got the winner literally with the last kick of the game. The fans going mad there away to St Johnstone. Celtic are going to win that 2-1.
Positive result for us, is it?
He's lost his jersey as well.
I think he's taking it off.
All right.
Let's go on. You were saying there?
Yeah, so I just think, generally speaking, certain sports need to take a leaf out of, we'll say, the respect that's engendered in rugby, in maybe basketball, and try and foster a better culture within the sport. You know, sometimes the rules allow for this dissent, you know, because it's not dealt with. It doesn't happen in rugby, but it doesn't happen in rugby because it's not accepted. And it's not accepted because someone at some point decided this is not going to be acceptable, because they put value on the referees. You know, because without the referees we don't have a game. You know, we don't have sport. And if, you know, the likes of Kevin and loads of referees like them are giving their time up for maybe 2 or 3 hours on a Saturday morning to go out and coach your kids and drive an hour or half an hour, whatever, and spend, you know, give a couple of hours of their morning. They're not doing it to screw a team over. They're doing it to, you know, I suppose, allow games to happen. And if we don't have referees, and if this continues, we won't have referees. Like we've seen them a couple of incidents. I suppose there was a bit of a strike in football or soccer down the Midlands there, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I think it was.
But there was one last year with the NDSL in November across all. They cancelled all their games because of abuse of referees.
And like if we look at, even just say, okay, I come from maybe a GA background, but look at the GA just as an example. The disciplinary process that undermines referees within that alone, you can go through any amount of committees to get to the point, and if you want, you can go probably to the European Court of Human Rights. You probably can go that far if you want. It needs to be streamlined right down into a point where referees' decision is valued, and you know that we're in a space where when referees are able to go out onto a pitch and come in off a pitch, and their presence is valued. And if we don't set the rules in place where people who are breaking them compromise that, this is going to continue. So I think that's very, very important. You know, rugby has it right, basketball to a large degree has it right. I think other sports need to look at what they're doing and see what can we do around education of both coaches and maybe parents to see how we can do it a little bit better. And that might mean tweaking rules and maybe disciplinary procedures to make that happen. I
think it's like with rugby, I mean, it needs to stem from the top, you know. I mean, if you look at the English Premier League and how the referees are confronted every weekend, you know, personal space, I mean, players are right up in their personal space, in their face, and it has to come from there. We see it in rugby, you know, that it comes from the very top, and that's why it filters all the way down. But I think it's hard to filter.
I also think it needs to happen at the local level. Right, yeah. I mean, so whether it's signs at the gate of the pitch that says this is not the All-Ireland final, even if it is the All-Ireland final, right? This is not the All-Ireland final for most people, right? Respect the referee, respect the players. You know, positive encouragement, silent sideline, whatever it is. You know, I think that would make some sense. I think having somebody in charge on the sideline to say, guys, this behaviour isn't acceptable, and as the club member here responsible for this, and all clubs are responsible for the behaviour of their supporters. This isn't okay. You're roaring and shouting at the referee or the child or the player or whatever it is. You need to stop. I think we need to do that at the club level, and I think that even at the mentor level and the team level, to say, look, we have a ref liaison and he or she is allowed to speak to the ref. I mean, you mentioned a text there, John, that someone under 15 or a 15-year-old ref is getting, somebody's asking him about a decision, at 15 on an under 10 game. I mean, there's no adult should be approaching that ref like that.
It's interesting to talk about All-Ireland final. I think for some parents in their own mind, that is their All-Ireland final for their kids. And that's some other text here.
Maybe that's a sign within itself. This is not your All-Ireland final.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. 53106 in judo, coaches are not allowed to speak while fighters are engaging. Any abuse of referees results in the person being asked to leave the venue. Respect first and foremost. It's really helpful for coaches and players of the club to present the objectives of the junior section at the beginning of the season. If it's inclusion and play every player, it allows them to approach parents, players and coaches if they begin chatting at players and coaches. If it's winning at all costs, the parents know what to expect and can choose to send their club to the child or the club or not. It also brings consistency to coaching practice within the club. Kind of splitting it up there. I don't know if the latter one is still acceptable. 53106, great discussion, lads, very informative. 2 points. 1, parents should practice not shouting and trying to coach from the sidelines. 2, no ref, no game. People need to remember that. Massive crisis coming for the GA and the LGFA in the next few years. Majority of the GA referees in Galway are in their late 50s and 60s. Referees need to be better paid and better minded, says Ray Silk, former All-Ireland winning captain with Galway.
Wow.
So much to unpick. In soccer, the league dictates in terms of the rules whether a player can move between an A team and a B team. The FAI needs to get control of the underage leagues, as without this we'll be having the same conversation in 10 years, says Paul in Dublin. Streaming allows kids to play at a level they feel they're contributing to the game, getting them to be part of a team that allows them to express themselves at game time and feel they're part of the team, says an under-14 Gaelic football coach. Also, we have parents shouting at your children. The refs is pathetic, so juvenile, grow up and encourage your children. I was at a game last weekend where young girls were in tears after the match due to what was being said to them and to adults by opposition parents on the line, trying to put them off when taking frees, abusing them, and all of the name of winning. And we wonder why there's a fall off in playing numbers. Lad's been involved in martial arts for years now as a coach and a referee at both kids and adults level. If there's any abuse from anyone, especially a kids match, the match is stopped, the caution given. If it happens again, the kid or the person throwing the abuse, either coach or parent, will then cause their child to be disqualified. Never usually happens once you can confirm the rules and give you a warning. It completely stops all the aggro, says Bob. And finally, we have just one to bring us to solutions here. After the recent spate of referee assaults, is it given that every referee in the country across all sports an opportunity to come together to address the issue of referee abuse? All refs get the abuse. Why haven't they all come together and refused their time, which is often voluntary, until this issue is addressed? It's beyond me, says Bernard in Cork. What do you think of that, Kevin O'Donnell?
So what I would say is abuse is real, it's there, but it's not at every match. And sometimes, and it's not at every club. In some clubs you'll have certain coaches that will be abusive and certain parents will be abusive. I continue to go out and referee because I love the game and I love refereeing. And that's a decision for me. I'm not part of a union, right? I'm a volunteer and I go out every week to do the best job that I can, limited as it may be, but I really genuinely do the best I can.
53106 as a kids GA coach, the best bit of advice I received at an early stage is to find what the player did right and praise that. Don't remark upon mistakes, as the player is the first person to know they made a mistake, but perhaps something good was done prior to the mistake that should be pointed out. In no time you'll become a more popular coach, and don't forget, for every one bad comment, a coach needs to make 7 good comments to make up. Did the Silent Sidelines work, Antonio Mantero?
Yeah, I think it did. I mean, it got people talking, whether they liked it or not. It got people talking, got a discussion going. It still gets people the discussion going. Certainly when teams come to me and they say, look, we want to do it, can we use the logos? Absolutely, they can use whatever they want. And then I might speak to them after how did it go? And I said, well, it was great because we got to see how the other sideline was, how loud and how vocal and how the constant stream of instruction versus our sideline, which was quiet. How did the children find it? Yeah, they felt it a bit strange because they've never experienced anything like that other than playing in the schoolyard or playing with their friends. So to most children now, it's the norm. This level of noise and this level of instruction, this constant stream of dictating and shouting and screaming, that's normal to children now. So they don't know any other way. So when you try to let them experience the other way. To go, oh, that was a bit strange, but it was good. But the idea is that you get children talking. They can now, pass on information to themselves, as opposed to just waiting for the sideline to decide what they're going to do. I think for coaches and parents, we need to realise that most children, the vast majority of children, 99% of them that get into sport, they get into sport just because they want to be with their friends and enjoying playing it. They don't want to be professional athletes. They don't want to be a professional sports star. Do they want to emulate them? Do they want to feel like they are? Do they want to try and be them on a sports pitch? Absolutely, yeah. They want to be, Ronaldo. They want to be Messi. They want to say they were Messi and Ronaldo. But that's as far as it goes. They just want to enjoy the experience of it. But they don't want to be a professional athlete. They just want to be involved in the process. They just want to be involved in the game and be playing the sport because it's fun and it's enjoyable. And it is fun and enjoyable. And for me as a coach, the vast majority of all my games are fun and enjoyable. And I think we need to stop taking the fun away and just really putting the fun back into youth sport.
Well said, Antonio Mantero. So just to finish up, folks, solutions. What do we think can be done to make life a bit better in terms of respect on a sporting field, both on the sideline and on the pitch as well? Keith Begley.
Look, I think on the back of these incidents, there's conversations starting to happen and there's solutions starting to come out. In fact, I'm aware of Offaly GA have put in a Respect the Referees initiative on a kind of an autumn tournament. It's an under-13 hurling and football, 2 tournaments to commemorate people who would have died in the Tullamore area. And the idea is that before every game, the kids would line up and they would shake the hands of the referee. And coaches would shake the hands of the referee. So it's like a kind of almost like a preventative mechanism of acknowledgement that, we're grateful that this referee is here. That might be a starting point. If it was only for maybe 1 month, a year or something like that, I don't know. But I think the fact that we're having this conversation, I think the fact that this conversation has been had might start solutions to, that this is becoming maybe something that becomes not acceptable. Broadly speaking,
if you just look at the reaction, I mean, it just might be from people who are passionate on the text machine, but it is overwhelming, and it is just pretty much confirming that this is just part of our culture.
Yeah. But culture can change.
And of course it can, and that's why we're having the discussion.
Yeah, and I, fair play to yourself, John, and Off the Ball for bringing this up on the kind of the national level. You're asking for solutions. I think parents need to take a step back, and maybe that's the ropes and the silent sideline. And clubs need to step up a little bit and say, if you are one of those parents who is abusing the ref or abusing the players, and I've heard it, and players have come to me in matches and said, that man is after saying X to me. Opposition coaches, I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. So parents need to take a bit of a step back and understand that the ref and the players are doing the best job that they can. And coaches need to step up and say, this is not acceptable and we need to let the children play. And whether that's the winning mentality or let the ref do the job that he or she needs to do or whatever. Those are the 2 things that I would do.
Just on Kevin's point, like in clubs, there are mechanisms in place for clubs to suspend club members and so on and so forth for such behaviour. And if clubs do step up and take action, then, it might be a short-term loss for a long-term gain, but it sets a bar in terms of how we conduct ourselves as parents, as coaches, around sport. And I think clubs need to take ownership.
I think the game, ultimately, you coach your teams during the week, and then the game is to show you what they've learned, to show you what, the things that they've brought from the training ground into the game. And they need to be able to do that with an element of freedom. It can't be a training session. The game can't be a training session where you're constantly instructing and teaching. You let them learn for themselves. And then after the game, you'll evaluate it. I think across the abuse and respect, certainly we need to do something maybe the first month of where most leagues start, which is September, maybe have a week or have a whole month in terms of respect. And not just respect in sport, but respect across society, because there is an element now where there is a lack of respect across society, and that is transferring into children's sport and into youth sport. And I think September for me would be a great month to, maybe have a Silent weekend. I know the FAI ran an initiative a number of years ago, which was Don't Cross the Line. So I'm sure other organisations like rugby and basketball have other initiatives, and it might be idea just to run them across the whole month of September, also incorporating just respect in general across society.
We're just going to finish it up here with Antonio Mantero, soccer coach, Keith Begley, performance psychologist, and Kevin O'Donnell, GA referee. I'm a schoolboy football referee, says one of our texters. I finished 3 games this morning, barely a word uttered by either side in the game. I found by communicating clear ground rules to coaches and players before starting and ensuring they know I'm open to dialogue and to explain decisions after a game, I found it always helps to stop frustration building at decisions, says Phil in Dublin. We also have, I coach multiple underage teams, boys and girls. I instruct my players to respect both the other players and the referee. I've had to talk to some parents recently about abuse of the refs and to stop coaching from the sidelines. I had one mother constantly telling her daughter to get up front, even though she was playing full back.
That's great. In a terrible way, right?
53106. The comments online are so dangerous and damaging to coaches at all levels. Guys would tweet about their coaches and their decision. Maybe the next tweet will be about mental health, etc. Online is so dangerous for coaches, this is one of our texters. Hi John, great discussion. A lot of cases, coaches are left in an unenviable position, which needs to be stated. There are plenty of coaches who are not focused on winning, but it's impossible to please everyone. If you play a weaker child on the second team, there's always complaint from the child or parent that they should be on the first team. If you bring them into the first team, they get either limited game time, or if they get adequate game time, their level is exposed and they're not developing as much as they would if they played a full game on a second team. In many cases, pleasing one person comes at the cost of disappointing another. What are the thoughts from studio on this?
I think for me, the streaming, it needs to happen. Obviously, I mean that's how it is across a lot of sports. I just think it happens too soon. I think from an early age, we're starting to look at 5 and 6 year olds and go, right, yeah, we'll put him with him and her with her, and we'll keep them together and we'll separate them. And for me, it just starts too soon. What you end up doing, you end up counteracting the ability of players, because if you look at the best dribblers across the world, when they started playing, they were playing against mixed abilities. If you look at some of the videos of Messi, he dribbled around loads of different ability kids. Some of them didn't look like, they were of the same level. But that in itself allowed him to experience dribbling, allowed him to make a decision. But if you had put him maybe with the best of the best at his age, I'm not sure that he would have been able to come out with those same dribbling skills. And I think we just stream a little bit too early. For me, I think streaming should probably happen when they get to 12 and 13. I think there's plenty of time to stream kids from when kids are in primary school. For me, it should be just mixed ability. They should be able to play with their friends. I know it can be difficult to put all their friends together, but there should be an element of mixed teams where you have a certain amount of players who were at a level mixed with other players, and that in itself will bring those players on, and it allows for a much more enjoyable experience as opposed to having A, B and C teams, because we all know that the A team, that's a lot of the times it is a win at all cost mentality. It's just
53106. I'm a basketball coach, and when the girls are very small, our message to the players has been respect for the ref, no debate. That's the message to the parents too. Not one of the team or parent ever showed disrespect to the refs, even when not happy with the decision. It has to start from the beginning of the children starting in any sport. The message needs to come from coaches at every training session and matches. I want to say this about Kevin though, O'Donnell. You do enjoy what you do. As you said, 90% of the time it's great. Yeah. And it's just a case of eradicating or trying to lessen this culture that seems to be at times over the top.
Yeah, I really enjoy refereeing, and I would encourage anybody who's fit and able to go out and referee, because yes, it's hard work and it's a mental workout as well as a physical workout, but it's great fun most of the time. I think what we're trying to deal with here is the kind of the 10%, 15% where coaches and or parents are taking things too far. From our side, and certainly from my side as a referee, communication is really key, right? I communicate, Antonio was talking about, at the start of the game, I communicate to the coaches now, I'll ref the game, I know what I'm doing. I study the rules, I read them before the game. I know what the difference is between this, that and the other. And I also communicate every single decision to the player involved. I'd say, I gave that free because of X, Y or Z. I'm very clear, and a lot of the time that sorts a lot of the things out. At the same time, I can't be having an ongoing conversation with coaches and parents and sidelines, because it's a huge pitch, it's a very dynamic environment, and I'm trying to keep up with play. So I'm not here for a conversation, I'm not here for a debate, I'm here to help the kids or the players enjoy themselves. That's my job, and let me do it.
I think for coaches it can be difficult. I mean, I try to remain calm, but when you have the other sideline that's constantly screaming and shouting for every decision, and sometimes you feel maybe they get that decision because if they shout enough they might get it, then that your sideline sometimes needs to shout and scream for some of their decisions as well, So I think, like as Kevin said, if the referee from the beginning says, look, I'm not going to accept any screaming and shouting over decisions from any of the sideline, then that stops that, and other sidelines don't feel that they need to scream and shout for decisions,
Yeah, I say, I don't need you to ref the game for me. I've got this. And it's gentle, but it's also clear, right? I've got this, don't worry, I know what I'm doing, I will keep up with play, and I'll explain every foul, every single one, to every single player. I'll say, this is what happened here, you grabbed her by the arm, or you did this or that or the other. Most of the players are not a problem, because remember, they can hear you. The problem is on the sideline when the coaches can, and of course they may not know the rules very well, they may be a little unfamiliar, and as I said at the solution section, you just need to step back a little bit and say, the ref actually knows what he's doing, right? Let him do or her do what they need to do.
And step back is the word, I think, for parents and coaches. Step back away from the action. Don't be encroaching on the sideline. Don't be coming onto the pitch 15, 20 yards inside the sideline if you're a coach, because you're preventing the player on that side from actually getting wide, or maybe experience a bit more opportunity to get on the ball because they're too afraid to go to the sideline because the coach is actually on the pitch as well.
Okay, Keith, final word from you.
I suppose, generally speaking, or broadly speaking, I'd kind of say that, we as adults, let it be coaches, parents, referees and so on, and organisers of sport, have to realise that kids' sport is not built for adults' needs. And, we've had our time with it. It's for the kids' needs, and why are they playing? It's for their fun, their environment. So it's a fun environment for them. So that when you're walking away on a Saturday or a Sunday after a match, that them kids have had a good time, that they want to go back the next day because it's been a positive experience. And if our behaviour as adults or coaches or whatever is compromising that as an adult, we need to look at ourselves. And beyond that, then, that rules or whatever applications need to come into play to ensure that, the behaviour and stuff that we're trying to talk about is dealt with in an appropriate fashion, let it be through club administration, localised level, or beyond that at a higher level, national level. If in really serious incidents, I think that needs to be looked at.
Keith Begley, accredited psychologist, Antonio Mantero, soccer coach, and Kevin O'Donnell, GA referee. Thanks so much for your time, folks, on the Saturday panel on this issue of respect.
Thank you.